Hey, welcome to Stunner Stage. I'm Stunner. This is my stage. I like to talk to people that I know. I like to talk to people that I'm friends with. Tonight, I get to do a little of that, but I also get to learn about somebody. The person that I'm interviewing tonight is somebody that I've respected for many, many years, that I've known about for many, many years, and that I've known, but not really known. So tonight, I'm going to get to know him a lot better. And after our conversation, I can honestly say he is a great, great dude, and I love to call him a friend of mine. I'm talking about the drummer and really driving force behind the coup de grace, Mr. Brett Degendorfer. Let's find out a little bit more about him tonight on Stunner Stage. Without further ado, Mr. Brett Degendorfer. Stunner Stage, hanging out with Brett. I ask everyone first, and you've seen a couple of these.
Yeah.
When did music start for you? How old were you, and what was that experience?
Okay, so it was really young. I was probably 6, maybe. My grandma had a copy of Meet the Beatles.
Oh.
And she had one of them console stereos, where you slide the door. And so she would put it on, and I would sit on the couch and I would do one of these.
right.
Things. Yeah, I used to bang my head against the couch. It was so good. But then I think my father bought a really nice stereo in like 73.
Okay.
I think about 1973, which would have made me like 8. Yeah, about 8. And he had bought Deep Purple Machine Head.
Oh, wow.
He had really good records like Dark Side of the Moon, and so I was.
So your dad was a rocker.
Yeah, and I was listening to Space Truck and just going, wow, like this. Yeah, at that age, so I was just like. So I thank him, because if he would have been a country dude, I don't know where I would be today.
Yeah, with me it was Beatles. My mom was huge on the Beatles.
Yeah.
I've said it before, she was huge on like Carly Simon. She loved the Moody Blues.
Yeah.
And it was every Saturday, Sunday when we're cleaning the house, that stuff was going.
Yeah.
So I was very young with me with music. So Beatles, and then getting right into
right into Machine Head. Like that was like my favorite album right off the bat. So I was just, and then I had uncles too, and like they had Led Zeppelin too, and so I kind of got to know that stuff too.
So when did you want to play music? So
this is another funny story. So my dad had a friend, his name was Richard, and he came over he'd stop by every once in a great while, and all of a sudden this one time he stopped by and he's like, hey, I got these instruments, can I leave them at your guys' house? I don't care if the kids play them or whatever, And he's like, my dad's like, sure, because we had a basement or whatever.
Right.
All of a sudden he hauls out this like red sparkled Ludwig drum kit and 5-piece, and he brings it down the stairs, and I helped him carry pieces in or whatever.
Okay.
And then he brought down this big bass amp, and because our ceiling was low, we laid it sideways instead.
Okay. Yeah.
And then he had a Fender bass, like a Fender Jazz or something.
Okay.
And of course I was drawn to the Fender Jazz right away. I was like, this is great. So like I plugged it in and stuff, and I played it a little bit, and I didn't know what I was doing.
How old were you?
It was 75, so I was 10.
Okay.
I was 10 years old. Yep, and all of a sudden I'm playing this thing and I'm messing around and I get electrocuted like bad. Like and that's how I became a drummer.
You're like,
no, I never want that to happen to me again.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so I was just totally like, oh, it hurt, man. It was a good shock.
So you went over to the drums.
Yep, so I went over to the drums, and I remember first trying to learn how to play Dream On by Aerosmith. That was
all by yourself?
Yep, I was trying to figure it out, and I wasn't doing that great. I couldn't quite get it. And then I had a neighbor who played drums a little bit, and he showed me the 4/4 time, you know.
Okay.
And once I nailed the 4/4 time, I pretty much taught myself everything.
So drums in the basement at 10, were you down there every day?
Yeah.
Every day?
Yeah.
Did you get to a point where you like had Dad's kick-ass stereo cranked and you were playing along?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
basic headphones. I put because the drums bleed right through.
Yep.
You know, so
Yep.
I'd put on headphones and I'd start playing to stuff, and then I just got. Thank God for parents of musicians.
Yeah.
Like I can say,
Yeah.
like putting up with drums from the minute I got home from school, and then my mom would flash the basement light on and off. That meant dinner. Yep.
Well, and back then, too, you didn't have the little neoprene skins you could put over them that kind of soften them. You were beating the heck out of the drums.
Yeah, there was no practice pad kit. It was crashing them and playing them. And she'd flash the light and I'd come up for dinner, and then when dinner was over, I'd go back down and I'd play. And then the funny thing is I'd come upstairs when I was done at, I don't know, 8:30 or whatever. The TV would just be cranked because they'd be watching some show.
You're trying to watch TV while you're drumming.
Yeah, and they were they put up with it for years.
Did you have music in school?
I did join band when I was in 7th grade.
Okay.
And
Who was your music teacher?
Miss Rupert, I
Miss
think.
Rupert?
Miss Rupert, I think. And I mean, it got to the point where, you know, you're hitting the bass, you're playing just the bass drum.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and then you're listening to that, and you're listening to the guy crash the cymbals, and then I remember sitting there thinking, well, I can do all this without any of these other people.
Right, because you're either the snare guy, you're either doing the toms, or you're the bass drum.
Right, right.
That's your.
So it got boring.
Okay.
The timpanis were cool because I knew I'd probably never own a timpani, so
Right.
that would be cool to play. Yeah, and then you could pedal it and go high or low. So yeah, but the one thing that was really cool was they had a room at Central Junior High where they had a 5-piece drum set up in this soundproofed glass thing. And one day I was like, I'm going in there.
No permission, no
Yeah.
sign up. You just.
Nope, I just went in there
Yeah.
and closed the door, and I just started playing. And it must have bled through a little bit because this kid that I played baseball with in elementary, he came in and saw me playing in there, and then me and him started a band. He was a guitar player.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Who was that?
His name was Steve Halverson.
Okay.
He had bought a brand new 77 Les Paul.
Oh my.
He only had a little Champ Fender amp.
Well, you spent all the money on the guitar.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
He did. So yeah, me and him started a band, and we had a bass player kid that started playing with us, and he wasn't really that good at it.
Well, you're a high school kid.
Yeah.
Still learning.
But we started learning, like, riding the storm out.
So it was all covers. Did you do any writing?
No,
at all?
no writing
Okay.
at that
Gotcha,
point.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yep, it was like riding the storm out. We tried to do Freebird, you know, we were, you know, playing all that. It was so, yeah, because it was like 77. We tried to play a Zeppelin tune and stuff like that. And my dad loved it because I wasn't out doing anything bad. I was
Right,
down in the
doing music,
basement.
and he loved music. Here's a question then. Your dad's into like Deep Purple and hard rock and even, say, metal, right?
Yeah.
What was your first concert?
I didn't. Okay, so this is another crazy story. Is I always hung out with kids that were older than me in the neighborhood, and this kid named Brian Holshoe had bought, and was his brother actually, who was even older than him, had bought like 5 Kiss tickets for it was the 1977 December 2nd, 77. So it was probably, I don't know if that would have been the Rock and Roll Over tour or the Love Gun tour. I'm not sure.
Were you a Kiss fan at that time?
Oh yeah, totally. So
Okay.
me and this Brian Holshoe kid used to listen to Kiss Alive in his room, and he had one of these light thingies that the light would heat the thing that would
Okay.
rotate. You know,
Yeah,
we used to listen to that, and I couldn't just looking at the pictures. You know, I was just into it. I was
Yeah.
like, and so, but the bummer was when it came down to the time to go, my mom pulled the plug on me. It's just like the movie. My mom,
like Detroit Rock City.
yes, but my mom wasn't religious like that. But she was like, I can't let you go because all these kids were way older than me. And at the time, I was so mad.
Yeah. And that was going to be your first concert?
That was going to be my first concert.
Okay. All right.
So then I didn't go to, my first concert ended up being Styx at the State Fair in 70, it was the Pieces of 8 tour, so it was somewhere around 78, 79, I forget.
That's still killer.
Yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah.
A band called New England opened up for them, and I was pretty excited.
I was talking to Frank Kohler and Gary Charlie not too long ago, and Frank was talking like he came up a little before us.
Yeah, for sure.
And Styx was playing his high school. Because, you know, he's Joliet and all that, and that's right where they came from. So it's crazy. It's like, you know, we go, Styx was huge to me too, because they were that perfect mix of heavy, but really melodic.
And great vocals.
Yes. Loved Styx. And then to know that, you know, Frank's like, yeah, high school dance, they were playing my high school dance.
That's crazy. I wonder what year that would have been.
It's all ancient to him. He talks about it in like caveman times.
Right.
But that's the thing.
Frank's been around forever.
That's the thing that I love about these things is talking to people that were around when things really started to happen.
Yeah, that were happening like that for sure.
Very cool. So Styx is your first concert.
Yeah.
Was that with family, friends?
It was my two neighbors, Phil Frazee and Tommy Frazee. They were brothers, and Phil was a year older than me, and his brother was 2 years older than me.
So
but he had his driver's license.
So how old were you there? Like 15, 16?
Yeah, I think I was 15.
Okay. Still not partaking in any of the extracurricular.
No, but there was people around us at the concert, and they were passing, you know, because that's how it was back in those days. Yeah, so we were like, you know, should we? We didn't know what to do, you know. It was one of those things, but no, it was a great show. They blew off some fireworks afterwards, and but you know, they weren't in their ballad phase at that time yet.
Oh, they were still doing some
Renegade, yeah, and they weren't, you know, there was no.
Well, I'm sure Lady was there.
Yeah, Lady was.
And then after that, it's like, oh, that's a hit. Let's do more of those.
Yes.
That was when it started to split a little bit.
The
from
money.
What I understand. Okay, so that's your first concert. Were you already in? But you were already in a band prior to going to your first concert.
Yeah, pretty much with my high school friends. So then, and like I grew out of that kind of, and then I ended up. Answering an ad. I can't remember if it was in a City Pages or what it was, but these two dudes wanted to play, like, they had a list of tunes that they wanted to play, like Van Halen and like the Cars and stuff like that. And I'm like, that sounds cool. I'm gonna call those guys or whatever, you know. Yeah. And then I started jamming with those guys, and we at my house we had like this detached, like, bigger than a garage but smaller than a barn type place in the back, and those guys came over and set their stuff up, and we played for years. It was crazy. Really? Yeah.
So were you at this point in time, you got your second real band, you're playing, you're doing covers, you're doing all that,
playing high school dances,
not writing yet, but you're doing high school dances?
Yeah.
When did the transition happen from that to maybe bars or the music scene, so to speak? Because you're still in Forest Lake, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you're doing high school stuff out there. You're kind of community center stuff, maybe.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And house parties,
right? Like
end of the summer, bring your tent.
Yep.
Big parties like that.
Same here. We were doing basement parties. We did this one huge apartment party that it was the last time they ever did it there because the community room was destroyed. There was like 150 to 200 people there just going crazy. and they had this elevated area where they had a pool table, and they had this like little iron fence so you wouldn't fall off the elevation.
Right.
It was perfect for a stage until there was 100 people yanking on this thing, trying to get to us. And so yeah, I fully understand basement parties and house
big
parties.
Yeah.
So when you started, when did you transition into being in a band that maybe did bars?
Well, so that was the band that we opened up for Obsession.
Okay, what was the name of that?
It was called Special Delivery.
Special Delivery.
Yeah, and then it changed its name into Rox, like ROX.
Okay.
And then then we continued to play.
You had said you weren't so happy with those.
We were writing songs by that time, though. We had some originals, punky kind of stuff like that. And so I got a taste of that, and then I totally left all that because there was these two dudes that were from Forest Lake that were older than me, but they were into Sabbath, and I think I was 19 and the guitar player was like 27.
Oh wow!
So there was a big difference.
Gotcha.
But we were awesome. Like, I mean, I don't mean to yank my own chain, but it was like we were doing Sabbath tunes, like Motley Crue had just came out, and we were doing a song
like Too Fast for Love,
something like that. Yeah, and then Red Hot, I think. And stuff like that. But we never wrote it. What was weird is we never really wrote any tunes. We were just really good at playing that kind of rock.
To me, it's like one of those things where when you say you don't mean to toot your own horn or anything, but I've been in quite a few bands, and some bands seem to be okay.
Right.
Where it's like we're playing the song kind of all right. And then there's other bands where you feel like you're in a freaking rock and roll band just going out there and knocking it down every night.
Right, with the confidence.
Yeah.
Like, so
I get exactly what you're saying. You found this, you gelled so well that it felt like you were in that rock and roll band every time.
Yeah, and it was great. And we'd go to rehearsal, and we'd spend 3 hours that night at rehearsal, and we'd be playing like Country Girl off of Mob Rules, and it sounded great. And then we got another guitar player and a bass player, and our bass player just became the singer then. Was the type thing.
Yeah.
And we did that for a little bit too. And then there was a full-on fist fight between the singer and the guitar player, the two original guys I started doing it with. Full-on fist fight. And then I think it scared the other two guys away. They were like, they didn't want anything to do with that.
So the band ended after that?
Yeah, and then the band ended.
Funny story with me. Avalanche used to play down the hall upstairs of Ryan's, and we were in room 28, and somewhere around room 22 there was a band called Zero.
Right.
And Zero was a thrash metal band. They were younger kids. I remember walking by their room, and they would always say hi and everything,
right.
And they were jamming, and I walked by their room one night, and I see the guitar player and the singer on the floor beating the hell out of each other. And the other three guys standing above them just like, hey, John.
And letting them go?
Just letting them go.
Yeah.
So I walk in to practice, and I go over, and, Wally's there, and Super Dave's there, and I go, well, I think Zero's done. I just saw them beating the hell out of each other. I think they're done. Okay. And then, 20 minutes later, Wally runs to the bathroom and comes back and goes, I thought you said they were done. They're jamming right now.
So they
just made up just fine.
That happened in the Coup, actually.
Did it really?
Yes.
Let's get to there. So when did tell me how the Coup de Gras came about.
My wife always yells at me because I make stories really long, but so I started working at a place called Bastien's in Circle Pines.
Okay.
And it was filled with all us same age guys, and we basically we'd get a pickup. They had pickup trucks for everybody, and we'd load our pickup trucks with auto paint and Bondo and 55-gallon drums, and everybody had their own route. Like, I was St. Paul, so I'd go down to University, and I'd hit University body shops, Laugh Out Brothers or whatever, and all those places.
Yep.
And then other guys would go to Anoka and all over the place.
Yeah.
So anyways, So we kind of it was cool because we all kind of bonded together as this group, you know. And there was a dude named Alex McNeil who did play bass in Vile.
Okay.
He's got red hair.
Yep.
He was the dude that got me in to Venom. Like, that's where it all started. It was like 83 or something.
Nice.
So he'd come to work and he was full on. He was a full on dude. Do I look like the goat today? He'd be doing it all. So there was him, and then there was another dude from Forest Lake that was older than me that I worked with, his name was Al Keys, and he was the same type of dude. They were like the same guy.
Right.
And so I would get all my, Al Keys and Forest Lake would have the Manowar and the Omen and all those bands. And then Alex McNeil had the Metallica and Anthrax and all that stuff, Metal Church.
Oh.
So I was getting it from both sides, and I was like, this is amazing.
And what were you listening to? Were you still listening to like the Deep Purple and more the maybe Iron Maiden?
Pretty much, yeah. Iron Maiden. I landed with Iron Maiden before that, so I was already kind of getting in that. Yeah. But I think it was those guys that, they started throwing this stuff at me, and they'd bring records to work, and then they would like take it home and record it.
Okay.
Give it back to me when you're done. They were cool like that.
I was the same way. I started out with, I think it was like Foreigner and Def Leppard, and then all of a sudden, Slayer?
Yeah, I know.
Celtic Frost?
I
Exodus?
know.
Who are these bands?
So anyways, Chris Westling, the original drummer from the Coup de Grace, worked with us in this group.
You weren't the original drummer of Coup de Grace?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
So Chris started the band with Jim Mahuro, Jimmy Coup.
Yep.
Chris and Jimmy started that band, and actually at that time, that was when my band had the fist fight and broke up. So I was
perfect segue.
Yeah, I was a little bandless.
Yeah.
But I remember Chris saying, "We're thinking about calling the band the Coup de Grace or maybe Cry Havoc. What do you think?" And I said, "I like Coup de Grace," and he was like, "Okay." So that kind of went around, and then. They have their little Bombs Away demo with the orange tape or whatever. Yep. So the picture of them on the inside, I took the picture of that.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of intertwined with them, but I wasn't really playing.
Right.
And then it wasn't until like 1990 where Chris told me, he was like, I feel like I'm going to want to quit, And they had already like had the songs, and I think they either already recorded the record I think they did, because it was like October of 1990, and I think that's when it came out. And I was like, you can't quit. I go, it's just starting to happen right now. You can't quit. And then I was on the road with a cover band. I think I was in Iowa in January of 91. And I get a message at my hotel room that I need to call Jimmy Mahuro.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
So that's how it happened. That's how I ended up in the Coup.
Wow. See, I remember when I was a young punk kid starting to write metal, and Barbed Wire was like, we were talking about just all the time. Yeah. Coup de Grace, cut the grass.
Yep,
good old cut the grass.
Yep, cut the grass.
Oh my God! All right, so then you get the call from Jimmy in '91, and you just go headlong in.
Yeah, that's what happened. So the band I was playing with. We pretty much were arguing. The singer had lost his voice from partying too much, and I was pissed off at him. And then I was like, see ya, and I left that, which was good because that was a cover band, and actually the good part about it, I didn't like doing it that much, but I got a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Because GMA would book us in towns for a week. We'd play the whole week.
Oh, that's right, because back then that's exactly how it was.
Yep.
You'd be 5-state area and you'd play 6 nights a week.
Yep, they'd send us to Minot for a week. We'd play every single night, 3 sets. And I had calluses on my fingers. I was playing so much.
I hate to tell you, but that's probably also one of the things that killed your singer.
Yeah, probably.
Because I know I couldn't have done that shit. 3 hours a night, 6 nights a week.
Yes. You'd set up on Monday afternoon, play Monday night, tear down Saturday night, load it in the U-Haul, and go to the next town.
Wow. What was the name of that band? Do you remember?
It was called Street Rage, and I Paul Christensen, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, he played in it with me.
Awesome.
There was another guitar player earlier than Paul. His name was Eric, and I can't remember his last name now. Eric. Scooter. Scott D. He was the bass player in it.
Okay.
I
don't know if I know that one.
I think he's lives down in Rochester now.
Okay.
But he was young at
So
the time.
let me ask you this: when you came up and you're playing drums and you're in a band in school and you're jamming with your friends, what was the first band locally that you looked up to?
So there was a place in Taylor's Falls called the Barn Dance or something like that. It was just a big barn. It was a bring your own bottle type place.
Gotcha.
And I would go there and see. I was young, underage still, but they'd let you in.
With a bottle?
Yeah, as long as you did. If you had a stamp, you could drink.
Okay.
If you didn't, I mean, it was laid back.
Yes.
Yes, Rocking Horse, Gary Charlie.
Oh my gosh, Gary Charlie.
Yes, I would go see Rocking Horse, Fairchild. I think Jesse Brady. There was a really good band with a girl singer in it called Loose Change or something like that back then.
All right.
That was really could play a lot of stuff. So we would, on the weekends, we would load in a car and just go there.
That was the hang.
It was $2 or something to get in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you were into that stuff, and you're underage, so what, like 17, 18?
Yep, 17, 18 for sure. Probably went there when I was 16 with my older band dudes I was hanging out with.
That's so crazy. I remember when I was talking to Gary Charlie, he was talking about Rocking Horse playing the Lambs Club all the time, which is on the east side of St. Paul.
Right.
And I had mentioned, my mother actually waitressed at the Lambs Club around that time. And he's like, we won't talk about those stories. And I thanked him for that.
Yeah. You don't want to know too much.
I don't want to know too much. But,
Yeah.
But that's awesome. So you kind of saw some of that, and did that inspire you to?
Yeah, for sure.
Do more?
The lights, the PA, the I was like, this is it. That's all I wanted to do.
That's awesome.
But eventually, you got to get a full-time job if you're not making enough money at it,
Well, yeah, that's where I'm at now, working 50 hours a week, and then weekend warrior, and then I sleep through Sunday, and then I start over again on Monday.
Yeah. You get all that extra rest on Sunday.
Yeah. So let's get back to Coup de Grace.
Yeah.
So when you started there, now that was that around the time where they put out like the real album, and they started getting some 93X love and all of that stuff too, or when did that really happen?
So the album, I think, was released in October of '90, and then I think Chris did some. They'd go, Toronto and do that. Montreal, I think they played, and then they did San Francisco, and they did that, and I think Chris maybe just felt like, you're driving really far away, and you might be playing a gig with like 40 people there. And it's a lot of time.
It's early, man. You had to build.
Right. No, I know. And that's the thing, too. It's like sometimes you got to give it some time. So so I've always felt kind of, what's the right word? Bad. Kind of felt bad that he dropped out, because he probably should have maybe stayed in it. But, of course, I was glad I was in it. And, there's another funny story where I hadn't played for a few years because I had a daughter in '86, so I kind of in '87, '88 kind of chilled back a little bit.
Yep.
Did my responsibilities as a father, but then I kind of split not from my daughter, but from her mom, and then I kind of felt like maybe I should get back in it, because I was a part-time dad at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I should probably maybe try to get into something again. So somebody called me and wanted me to come out and try out or play. And I remember I had a Coup de Grace fish shirt on when I went to try out for this band. And I think I had cut my hair, so my hair wasn't really long.
Right.
It was probably,
just shoulder length.
yeah. And I went and tried out, and I think these guys were looking for a really long haired dude or something.
Gotta have the image.
Right. But they tried out a bass player at the same time. And I remember when I set up my kit and he was setting up his bass stuff, he goes, "Oh, cool band," about my shirt. And I go, "Yeah, too bad I'm not trying out for that band." As a joke, I said. And then a few years later, it was the bass player for False Oath.
Clint?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he saw that I was in the Coup de Grace, and he's like, "Dude, you're in the band." Like,
Oh, so Clint was the guy that tried out at that time when you were wearing the Coup de Grace shirt?
yeah, at the same time I did.
He was such a cool guy.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's doing today.
Yeah. But it was so funny how he was like, "Dude," like he couldn't believe that he said that to me that day about the shirt, or we had that conversation. And
Nice, man.
And then I was in the band, but so yeah, it was I felt unfortunate for Chris as a friend, and then, but of course I was, he recommended me to them, so
Right.
you know what I mean.
Right.
So that's kind of how
So what's
that
some of the
went.
biggest things that you got to do so far? Because you're still in Coup de Grace right now.
Yeah, we haven't played for years, but we actually have a record coming out, believe it or not. So this is kind of perfect timing to talk
Awesome.
about this. Yeah, because we had written a bunch of songs late 90s, early 2000s, and then Jimmy went off to Andrew WK. And I don't know. Yeah, so then...
And then didn't he go on like a pilgrimage to Ireland? And
he still does that.
Does he?
He's a singer in Ireland. He sings in the pubs and people love him, and he just makes money and he just does it. He loves it. So that's...
Bless him. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure.
It's awesome. Followed his dream wherever it takes him.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest things that happened with the Coup while you were in there?
Well, there was some pretty cool stuff that happened. Like when I first joined, I rehearsed with them for maybe a month, not every day, just.
Mhm.
And then we went on tour in Michigan, and we did all these clubs in Michigan, Grand Rapids and stuff, and with Drop Hammer.
I remember Drop Hammer.
Yeah, they're another band on Red Decibel. So we did that together, and that was cool. And then shortly after that, we went on a tour with a band called Skin Yard. That's from Seattle.
Okay.
They're probably the first grunge band.
Wow. What was Skin Yard?
Yes, they're called Skin Yard, and Jack Endino was the guitar player.
Okay.
And if you ever watch anything on grunge, he's the guy they're always talking to. But for some reason, Skin Yard never made it like everyone else
Oh,
did.
believe me, there was a lot of that. I was out there at that
Yeah, I
time.
remember hearing that you were there.
But I was in a thrash metal band, and nobody was looking for thrash metal bands then. So I ended up coming on.
Yeah.
But I never heard of Skin Yard. I mean, I heard of it. 90% of everybody else that was going to Sub Pop and all that. But
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever find a record, it's called 1,000 Smiling Knuckles.
okay.
Skin Yard, 1,000 Smiling.
Awesome.
I think that was the record they were on when we were touring with them. But then the funny thing was, they'd say, we played this place called The Bank, and it was all these new acts in New York, and King Horse was on it, and all these other bands, and I remember Skin Yard saying to us, "Do you guys got any label people coming here to see you?" Because they wanted somebody to see them,
Mhm.
and we're like, "Yeah, there's some people coming," and they were like, "Well, I hope they stick around and see us."
So were they on the same label as you currently, or were they trying to get to a different label, or were they just
They
doing
were.
it
I think.
kinda on
I
their
don't
own?
know. I think they were on their own.
Because that was a thing too early in that time where I had some buddies that were out in Seattle, and then the next thing you know, I'm getting phone calls. Hey, can we crash at your house? We're going to be in there playing this party.
Right.
On Friday, and I'm like, what? I didn't even know you were touring.
Right.
They just get in the van and go.
Right. Well, that's kind of what we did a little bit. I mean, Red Decibel would, Brent Ashley and Jake Wisely would hook us up with the stuff, and then we would go out and do it. But I think the Skinyard album was on a label called Cruz.
Okay.
CRUZ or something it was.
Okay.
But you know, they were a great band. And then we did some shows with Last Crack.
Oh, Butto.
Yeah, they're so good. Man, I love those guys. Burning Time is such a good record. And so we did some shows with them, and then we were in Madison, and then the Cheap Tricks manager, Ken Adamani, saw us. And then he was like, he wanted to be our manager, because we were looking for a manager, and it kind of fell in our lap. But of course, you have to be careful. Because, of course, me, it's a no-brainer. Oh, the guy knows everybody.
Right.
This is going to be great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out that way.
Does everybody like him?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, because all of a sudden you could take on somebody, and he did lots of stuff. Like we were on a Cheap Trick tour for 14 shows, I think. And
Nice.
it was kind of a Midwest, but kind of a weird combination. You know what I mean? Like you get older Cheap Trick fans coming, and then they're going, who are these guys? They're loud and obnoxious, you know. But it was cool to do, that's for sure. There was people like whenever we did, like we were on tour with the Mentors, you know.
My gosh, El Douche.
Yes. Yes.
We won't go through the lyrics.
No.
You don't want to do that.
No. But I had fun listening and watching every single
The Mentors used to have to wear hoods because they didn't want you to know who they actually were.
Yeah.
In case you did catch them off stage. They were not nice.
Yeah. So yeah, we toured. We did 12 shows in New York and New Jersey.
That might have actually went better music-wise.
It kind of did.
Okay.
It kind of did, because you had your crazy Mentors fans, and then we were metal, and then I think Ween opened up a few of them.
Okay.
And they were still the two playing to the tape or whatever, you know.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
And where was this? Was East Coast, you said?
Yeah, on the East Coast.
Okay. What's the furthest away you ever played?
Vancouver. I mean, we played in LA and stuff, but I don't know if that's any further than Vancouver.
Well, that's another country.
Yeah, yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. I think we did 2 shows in Vancouver with Reverend.
Oh, with David Wayne.
David Wayne.
He was one of my vocal heroes.
Yes.
Like early Metal Church, I thought David Wayne was amazing,
Yeah.
and then they fired him for the Skinny Blonde, and I thought, well, I'm going to be a Reverend fan now.
Yeah, yeah.
But then, you know, he passed, but God, what a great singer, I thought.
He was. They had a album release party at, like, the Whiskey. I still have the card. It's like
You got to play the Whiskey?
Well, no, we didn't play.
Okay, I'm like, whoa!
We got invited to the album release party because they were on a label called Charisma, and Charisma wanted us on their label. A guy named Jeff Finster was the guy who was trying to get us on there, and of course, we were at the label.
Right, schmoozing a little.
Yeah, they're like, here's go to the Reverend album release party, so we went. And we didn't play the Whiskey in LA though. We played some, like the Coconut Teaser and some other places.
Was there any clubs that you had always wanted to play that you got to play?
Okay, the coolest club that I feel like I ever played was called the Metal Church in New York. What was the other? They had another name for it. What was the other name for it? It was this old church. Okay, this is like crazy. It's this. We played with Blitz Beer there.
Okay.
It was this old church really cool church. They turned it into a rock club. And it had this thing that went around the top, kind of like First Avenue, how it's got the thing around the top. But they had these cages with these girls in them that suspended in the air.
God.
And so we played. We got a great time slot. It was like 11:30.
Okay.
Her perfect time slot. In New York, because bands will play at 2.
Right.
You know.
People are just coming out at 11.
Yes.
And you're getting a full crowd.
Yeah, we had a full crowd. This place was packed as far as I could see, all the way around the top. Girls in these cages up above, and it was awesome. And I remember I was playing, and the lights would shine out on the crowd, and there was this one dude that was just taller than everyone else. And I'd play, and every once in a while I'd catch him out the corner of my eye, you know, probably 8 rows back or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that dude, like, why do I? It was Joey Ramone.
Oh my God, dude!
And he came up afterwards and was like, that was great, man, I love that, you guys were awesome. And just a tiny chat, and then a thanks, but I didn't talk to him much more than that. I kind of wish I would have.
Too shy?
Yes, I was. Too shy.
I fully get that.
It happens to me all the time, because I meet all these people, and I don't want to come off as like either too like excited or too, you know, it's kind of.
Oh, absolutely. I remember TNT played a festival. It was Halfway Jam, and we were on the main stage at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then we were going to headline the small stage at 10 at night. So we had like 7 hours of hanging with all access passes.
Right.
So we're hanging out like by the food tent just because we didn't know where to go. We didn't have the trailers or anything.
Right.
But during that day, it's like just rock star after rock star coming up, and I'm just.
I know.
I'd love to say hi to, you know,
Lemmy.
Michael Sweet and Don Dokken and all these guys, and I'm just like, no, I'm not going to be that guy.
I couldn't talk to Lemmy. I was like, I took my friend Ross had the camera, and he's like, take a picture of me and Lemmy, and I'm like, okay. So I'm taking a picture of him and Lemmy, and then the thing didn't work, and I'm like, wait, and Lemmy's like, come on, man, take the picture. And I'm just,
I'm sorry, Lemmy.
I'm sorry, Lemmy. And then finally, and then I went, so I made sure I got enough of them, you know. But it's like, I did, you know, what do you say? Like Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee are leaning against the wall right there, and I'm over here with Resh, and I'm like, what do you say to them? I mean, I'm gonna say something stupid.
Oh, believe
and they
me.
meet everybody, so what? It's the same. You know what I mean?
Odd story too is a 16-year-old kid hanging out at Ryan's. Regime was my favorite band.
Yeah.
Armored Saint plays Ryan's. 16-year-old kid. Pat is bar manager.
Yeah.
She takes me downstairs to meet them after the show.
Yeah.
You know, and they're sitting there in their terry cloth robes and just drinking in the corner, having whiskey and stuff. And I'm a 16-year-old kid like, oh my God, you guys, so awesome, thank you. And this is before they had played First Avenue for the Halloween show and all that.
Right.
Before that. So, Dave was still alive and all that. And this year, in April, I went down to Iowa because my friend Tony got the gig roadieing for them. Oh, right. For a tour.
Okay.
So he's like, come on down and meet them. And within 5 minutes of meeting them, I'm like, when I was 16, and John Bush is like, right on, man. And he walks away. And I'm just like, oh, I just totally fanboyed John Bush. Oh.
No, I know. That's the thing. It's like, the one thing that was cool was playing with Cheap Trick for so many shows. Yeah. Eventually, that wall comes down, and then you can actually talk to them and joke about stuff, and you can. But it took 6 shows before finally they were doing sound check, and I said, "Play down," and Rick goes, and he starts playing it. And then it seemed like after that, Robin would come up to me, and then he'd talk to me, and Rick was coming in the dressing room going, "Where's all the girls, man?" And I'm like, "We're a metal band, dude. There ain't no girls in here." You know, so...
You think it's because you picked a song that wasn't like The Flame or Dream Police?
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, he actually knows who the hell we are."
Right.
It's probably some little of that too.
Yeah, I was like, well, finally your guard gets... You're not so, like, uptight about, am I going to say something stupid? So, yeah, it got better, like, when you're around him enough. But
So tell me then, so you gave me some really good stories of when you were making that run. What happened, and you don't have to go into super detail if it's not great, but what happened that Jimmy split and did the Andrew WK thing and the band kind of like just on hiatus at that point, right?
Well, there was a period right before I got married where I always felt like the band kind of would play a gig and then we'd get paid and we'd like pay our rehearsal rent. You know, it was paying for itself somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
And it got to the point where we had like 10 songs, but we weren't finishing them. And I think I got depressed. I was like, this is getting depressing for me because it doesn't feel like it's doing going forward, kind of. And so I kind of told them I needed a break or I needed to step back. And so they had a guy named Paulie Thompson come in and he started playing. And then all of a sudden they started finishing songs, you know, they started things like, I'm not saying it was because of me, but it was like, all of a sudden I'm watching them go, oh, they're opening up for Merciful Fate all of a sudden, you know. Yeah. So I was like, but then Paulie was from Iowa, so he got sick of driving up here all the time, so he wanted out. So then I went back in again.
So do you think, like, and I've said this before too, is like, when you're in a band, you're hungry, you want maybe to write music, maybe to learn music, maybe to play a show, maybe to play 5 shows, maybe to tour,
right,
maybe to record an album. But then if things don't continue to grow and evolve, your soul starts to shrink. And things that would never bother you on day one, now they start to bother you.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where you were at?
That's where I was at. That's where I was at. It was
and then that little break, that stuff that got me all frustrated isn't that important.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
So how long were you away, do you think?
I was probably away for really close to a year, I think. It was probably about a year. And I was hungry to come back. I needed to play, so. And then we wrote a bunch of great songs. And it was almost like you know, I felt like in the early 90s we had a chance to get a record deal and really make something happen, and then it swooped down a little bit. You know, the grunge and
timing is everything, man.
Yeah. And I felt when I got back into it again, it's like a second chance. All of a sudden we got East West calling saying they might want to sign us. You know, you get that stuff starting to happen. And it felt really good. And then we had an incident in the band between a couple of them. And Jimmy had an incident where he got his car towed. Snow crap, you know.
Yeah.
And then they punctured his gas tank, and then he got it fixed. But then all of a sudden the fuel pump went out, and that's in the gas tank, and things were like, it seemed like everything bad in Minnesota was happening
all at once.
And
Boom, boom.
then he was like, I'm out of here. I got to leave this town, and he moved to Chicago, and that was kind of.
Wow.
When we all kind of chilled back down again, you know. So then he worked at the Blue. What do they call? House of Blues.
Okay.
He worked at the House of Blues.
And met somebody for Andrew WK and did that stint and all that.
I don't know if he really. I think he met Andrew WK through Matt Sweeney, who was in a band called Skunk, but now he was doing something for a label or something. And I think he said, I got this kid named Andrew, and he's like, Jimmy, here. Like,
show them the ropes.
yeah, like help this kid get
cool.
it done. So that's kind of how that came about.
So what were you doing after that all kind of transpired? You just kind of went back to being a dad? And...
Yeah, well then me and Melissa had triplets. 2003.
I mean, I know you guys had children. I did triplets?
Yeah, so we had triplets. Livy and Gavin and Vincent, and my hands were full.
She was so tiny.
Yeah.
She had 3 babies at once.
Yep, our hands were full, man. It was an assembly line.
Wow.
Change a diaper, change a diaper, change a diaper, feed a kid, feed.
So it was probably a good thing that
you
weren't trying to juggle a music career and being a supportive husband and father.
Right. So yeah, no, it was perfect timing for Jimmy to go, I need to go, and then me being like, I got to take care of kids. And Steve Rush started his own studio called Burn Method, and he had bands coming in recording, so he had that going on. Chauncey, I think, moved to L.A.
Yep.
And Davies, he just is wherever.
He pops in like
he does.
Oddly enough, just weirdly. When I was playing in TNT, it was like all of a sudden I would get Facebook messages from him saying, "Dude, you're awesome." I'm like, "Okay, thanks, man. Nice to hear from you." And then I'd be playing, and you're playing for an hour or so, and 2 songs into the set, he's front row like, "Yeah!" And then the set's over, and I'm looking for him. He's gone already.
Yeah, he's gone.
He's gone.
He was kind of like that in the band. All of a sudden we're playing, all of a sudden he's in L.A. with Tommy Lee, because Tommy Lee's got a solo thing, and Tommy's going to be the bass player. Yeah, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, our bass player's gone. Okay. So yeah, Tommy's the greatest musician in this freaking state.
He's amazing.
He is. He's so good. He can play flamenco guitar. He can play bass like a monster. He's so good, but if he could maybe focus on that.
But if he could focus on that, maybe he wouldn't be so good.
That could be. That could be. He is the master at getting it done.
So now where are you then? So you, with all that, going back to being a husband and a father and raising triplets?
So then Jimmy leaves Andrew WK in 2003 or 4, something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got a plane ticket for you to come to L.A. and we're gonna do drum tracks for all these songs we wrote. And I said, okay. So I got on a plane with my cymbal bag and my foot pedals.
Okay.
It was the same guy that recorded our second album that I'm on, actually, which isn't quite as metal as the first album.
More hard rock.
Yeah.
Was Chauncey on that one?
No, it was it was Kyle Lund was the bass player, and then Jimmy and Steve and me.
Gotcha.
And we recorded at the Mouse. He called it the Mouse House. It was a house. It had a pool. It was your old typical LA one level, laid out place.
Yeah.
And we just set the drums up in the living room, and that's how we recorded that record. But at this time, in 2004, I think it was, he was in a new place with a really tall ceiling, and he still had it a little bit under construction. But me and Jimmy banged out like 12 songs in like 3 days. And I got back on the plane and came home.
Wow.
And so that's and then of course they took my drum tracks and they went to Steve's Burn Method studio and they worked on guitar and whatever they worked on. I was there a few times, but they were doing rhythm guitars and leads and doing all that kind of stuff. And then Jimmy took off again to go do his Ireland stuff,
So, did you know then how big of a Thin Lizzy fan he was?
Yeah.
So he was always a Thin Lizzy guy.
Well, Steve Rush got him into Thin Lizzy.
Okay.
Like when they were like talking about doing a few cover songs in the Coup, even before I was in the Coup, they were talking about doing Emerald and Dancing in the Moonlight.
It's always been one of my guilty pleasures too.
Yeah, for sure.
So good.
Yeah.
So so then that's still almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about it.
He dips out for a while, and then where does it go from there?
So then, I think at one point Jimmy started working on some solo stuff of his own, and we were just here. I mean, my kids were still young, you know, and it's pretty, you know, picking them up from school and all that stuff. You go through that elementary phase. But then in 2010, 2009, towards the end, Steve was painting in downtown Minneapolis, and he was in a bucket truck, and the bucket truck went down a ramp thingy or something, and he was in the bucket, and it hit, and he fell with the whole bucket and everything, and he messed up I think it was his left foot, just messed it up really bad, and so he was in the hospital for a while, and then he finally got out, but he had to, I think he was at home, and he had to keep it up, and he had to do all this stuff. I'm sure it was painful as hell, because I've sprained my ankle before.
We're just thankful it was only the foot and not the life.
Yeah, well, that's what ended up happening. So he got, I think it happened in like the fall of '09, and then in January of 2010 he had a heart attack. And I think we think it was complications from his foot, a clot in his leg or something. So then he passed away. He was in the hospital for 3 nights, and I went there every night with Kyle went, Chad Hendricks, you know Chad.
Yep.
We would go there every night and hang out, just hoping that he would do something, you know, move or something. And yeah, it never happened. So yeah,
Sorry for your loss there, man.
Yeah, that was a bummer, because he was such a great human being, on top of being such a great musician. I still get choked up, so.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
I still get choked up about it. But yeah, so we lost him. So now I sit over the years thinking, okay, I got these great drum tracks sitting there, and we have a bunch of stuff on it, you know. And then just a few years ago, I was working on a car with my dad, and I said to my dad, I go, God, I'd love to put Artist Survival out on vinyl, just because it's always been only on a CD, you know.
Yep.
And I was like, why don't you help me do this, you know, like help me fund it, you know, or whatever. And he was like, sure, you know. And so then I started getting the ball rolling on that. And then, of course, Jimmy flies in, and he's like, why don't we just put it all out, you know? And I'm like, okay, you know. So I started digging in hard drives and pulling out sessions, and then we started going to John Field's studio, and we started mixing stuff, and Jimmy sang some stuff, and so I got a guy master just before I pulled up. My mastering guy called, and I said, I hope you don't think I'm too picky, but some of it lost its balls, you know. There's certain songs you want, you know, and he's like, no, dude, this is what we do. We talk about what you heard and how different what you want to do to it. So I'm kind of excited.
Well, now when you're saying put it all out, what do you mean by put it all out?
So it's a full. So it's going to be 2 records. It's going to be like the first record's going to be all the stuff that I did, the drum tracks at Mauser's, and I think there's one tune that we maybe did a demo for in like '93 or something with Toby Wright, who does a lot of the Alice in Chains stuff. Yeah. So that'll be that, and then the second record will be the Artist Survival record, and then I'm throwing in a download card that's got all this crazy demo stuff and live crap that I've found.
That's amazing. That is so cool. Because I think we all get to that point too. Like, I was talking to Wally a couple months ago about the Avalanche stuff.
You guys probably got more.
There's a good 6 songs that we always recorded what we had,
Right.
and we always put it out. But we were in the middle of doing a second album,
Yeah.
and then the band imploded.
Right.
So we've got like a couple unreleased things,
Right.
and now here it is 25 years later, and we almost want to re-record them.
Do it.
We still kind of can.
There's something inside you that says, when you know that there's stuff, that you just want to just do it. You
And
know what I mean?
that's the creation, right?
Right.
If nothing against people in cover bands, but if you actually write something and create something, it is a different feeling
It is.
than just going out there and playing somebody else's music for people and having a good time.
It is.
I've done both,
Yeah.
and I still tell people to this day that's the thing I miss about not being in an original band today.
Is the creativity.
That creativity and
the
that communication.
satisfaction. Yeah, the satisfaction you get from it. Like after you write that song and it sounds kick-ass, you're like, damn, that was good.
Even some of them that aren't so kick-ass. And later on you go, well, it's all right. Maybe we'll put it on the album. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I found DAT tapes that have songs that never got vocals put on. And I'm like, this is a cool outtake. It's like me playing double kick, and I'm like, damn, that was really good. It sounds like some kind of Rush instrumental thing or something.
Nice.
And then I'm like, throw it on the download card, and there's a bunch of that kind of stuff. And then
So when are you open to get this thing out there to the world?
you know what? They say it's getting quicker time frame for them to do vinyl and stuff like that now because they're not so backed up. So if the mastering guy gets the stuff done within maybe a month or so,
Oh, you're amazing.
yeah, then I can get my artwork, because I have some artwork, and it's not skulls or anything. It's
Come on, man, it's metal.
we're not metal though. That's the whole thing. I mean, the first album is definitely metal.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fans out there that are probably disappointed that it isn't what that was.
It's growth, man.
It is. It is
growth.
It's learning how to craft a song and a song style.
Yeah.
And we were all young and was full of, at one point.
Piss and vinegar.
Exactly. Exactly.
Who can I piss
But
off
I'm
this
proud. I'm as proud as these songs now that I'm gonna put out as I was for any of the heavier stuff that might have came earlier or something.
I just give it to you that you held on to that. I mean, the tracks are 20 years old.
Yeah. Well, and we had trouble.
Yeah.
Like, I can't open this, and then okay, I know a guy who has old Pro Tools.
Oh wow! Yeah, because they don't support something.
Yes.
Oh my god!
And then we had to, that's why it's taken so long. Like, I brought this up on the Coup de Grace Facebook page like 2 years ago, and I think people just think maybe it's not going to happen, but it took that long to get. And we've had so many people that have been so generous. Like, no one's like, everybody's like, okay, here, and they'll do something. Yeah. And I think when the end of it's done, I need to throw a party of some kind and just and do something for everybody or something at one time or something.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
have a listening party for everyone that helped put it together.
Yeah, something. And there's some people that are like, are you going to play, have an album release party and play? And I'm like, I just don't think that can happen because, first of all, Steve being passed away and Jimmy doing what he does now probably doesn't want to try to, you know what I mean? It's like, it could be a tough thing. And I don't want to, like, go, oh, there's this release party and then have, like, 20 people show up.
You can also just do a release listening party.
Right.
A hang.
Right.
There's a lot of people. I was surprised when we did the Avalanche reunion after 20 years.
You guys get some people to come on. I didn't come, but
it was crazy because we weren't huge by any means. We'd get 100.
No, you guys are great. You guys are great.
But we got a couple hundred people 20 some years later just putting it out there on Facebook that we were going to do a reunion, and I was pretty shocked and happy with it.
Right.
So. You never know. If you tell people you're going to have a listening party for unreleased stuff
true.
that the Coup did. All us old school Coup fans.
Maybe we'll come. Yeah, maybe.
Come with my cut the grass shirt.
Well, cool. I'm glad that you say that. It's funny. My son Gavin, he's totally into. He's digging up metal from the old days, like all this new wave British heavy metal stuff that came out in the 70s and
like
all this,
Saxon and stuff.
Yeah, well, even like stuff I've never even heard of. I'm like, I don't know who that is.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so like he's doing these deep dives on the internet and finding all this crazy stuff.
Dude, you can thank how horrible modern music is for younger kids discovering old rock and metal.
I gave him the Avalanche CD.
Oh,
I'm going, here, listen to this. I gave him that. I gave him the Juggernaut CD. I'm
Mark
like, this,
Stone.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm like, this stuff is great, man. You gotta listen. If you're into this now, you gotta listen to this stuff.
Yeah.
Right from our town.
Yeah.
It's not Prince and it's not Husker Du or the Replacements, but you're gonna love it.
You know what's funny about you mentioned Husker Du? When I was 16 years old, my best friend Wally, who was in Avalanche with me, we're at Northern Lights in the Midway, and we see the Regime cassette.
Yeah.
Dead serious. And I get that, and that changes my life, really.
Right.
Because I got that cassette. And I find out years later that at the time that I'm buying this cassette, Husker Du's downstairs practicing.
Practicing downstairs.
Because they practiced right under Northern Lights.
I used to go there all the time, too.
In the Midway?
Yeah, my big thing was when CDs started coming out, they'd take all their promo vinyl, like Injustice for All, and $4. And I used to go in there and just...
Oh, wow.
I used to score all this great vinyl out of there. And I was always shocked that it was there because, like, all the first 4 albums of Metallica on picture disc, you know, they're $12 each or something. I just buy them. And I love that place.
Yeah.
They had lots of good stuff there.
Too bad it went away.
I know. It's still something, though, isn't it? Like a hip-hop?
I don't even know. It was like urban something for a while.
Yes.
But I don't know what it is now. But we used to always go to the Northern Lights up on University. Or not University. That's the one that we got that at.
Yeah.
The one on White Bear. In,
on
St.
White Bear
Paul.
Avenue.
That was where I went. We went up there and met Overkill, and that's where they'd always do the in-stores up there and stuff, and did that. But
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Remember that club that was called Spanky's?
Yep.
So did Overkill play at Spanky's? Because I want to say they did.
They played at the one, I think it was called Checkers when they played.
Oh, okay,
But
so it's called
you're
that.
talking about Spanky's that was across from the Viaduct Inn, underneath Earl Street Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, and then also Cacophony played there too, which was crazy to think of.
I think a Nitro, band called Nitro played there.
With Jim Gillette, the super high screaming singer. They had a very short run, and I believe when it switched over to Checkers is when they started really doing bands.
Yeah, because I could have swore I spent the whole afternoon there and saw Overkill sound check, and then I met their sound man. And I didn't have a ticket, but I just hung out all day, and they just left me in there to be. But for some reason, I have a real foggy memory.
For some reason?
Yeah.
Maybe it's because we're old.
Of all the shows that I saw at that place, I'm always like...
I remember seeing Overkill for the first time when they opened in '86 for Slayer at First Ave.
Right.
And I was just blown away by it.
Right.
I mean, to me, they were better than Slayer. And we're talking Slayer, Rain and Blood Slayer.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, for this band to just take Slayer out in my mind, the next day I was all about it, man.
Rain and Blood, what an album, man.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, my God. Fast. And being a drummer is like...
Oh, my God, dude.
It was so... Oh, my God.
22 minutes of chaos.
It was.
I've never heard of an album being so short.
I was almost...
It seemed so
Yeah, it was
full.
like 30 minutes or something, wasn't it?
And it was just perfect.
Yeah. I remember when South of Heaven came out, I was kind of like, oh, I could almost play to this. You know?
Somebody the other night at a show was like, play Slayer! And I'm like, well, they actually do have an album that's got some melody to it. You guys know any Slayer? You do some South of Heaven, I guess. You know?
Yeah.
Brett, thank you so much for coming here and chatting.
Yes, no problem. I enjoyed it.
It has been an honor,
Yeah.
sir.
If we have a album release party, I'll tell you so you can maybe come.
Oh, there is no maybe.
Okay.
Just give me a good warning so I can take the night off from the other project I'm doing.
All right.
All right, thanks, man. And thank you so much for watching.